And now here is part 2 of the John Kimball interview.
But I wanted all the, I want it done on several passes. I wanted to use a regular lens to shoot it and then have it projected by, for the backgrounds, using a, cinemascope lens, so you get a kind of a rainbow effect. Well, they looked at my instructions and they said, this guy's crazy, and they threw it out. They didn't understand.
But you knew how to do it because you've been doing it when you were doing the commercials and stuff like that.
I had
right?
one scene they shot perfectly at Dixon Vasu the first time, and they never could get it right in New York. New York was far behind by this time than the technology with the computerized animation stands that they were using here in Hollywood at the time. One of the commercials I did for Bob Abel, I had 21 passes. I reached the reciprocity of the film because it was been back and forward so many times.
And start tearing sprockets.
Well, no, what they do is it develops static electricity. Luckily, everything I shot came out perfect, but then they tried to shoot other stuff on that same roll of film, and they got flashes of light in it, and hell had to be redone.
Oh, so that's not good.
But I would get phone calls sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning, and there would be a problem with a scene.
How come this isn't working for us?
Yeah, and I would have 5 clients flying out from Chicago to look at this commercial the next day. Sometimes it would be a pencil test, and sometimes it would be the final shooting.
Yeah.
So I have to wake up, get in my car, drive down to camera. And I remember I had 2 whole long pans of butterfly girls and bubbles that I had to completely repeg because they had been done.
This is a commercial, right?
Yeah, done wrong. And it had to be shot that evening. So I was there till, for another 2 hours doing that. And, that's the kind of thing that happened. I remember on one 7-Up sugar-free commercial, I started at 10 in the morning and finished at 11 o'clock the next day because I had to be at camera.
So you were there for 25 hours.
Yeah, I had to explain every scene, how what to shoot, how to shoot this exposure and that, because it was impossible to put it all on an exposure sheet, and it came out perfect. It was just one of those lucky things that happened. But
and you're on a tight deadline.
Right.
So.
Well, when I went off to work for Bob's Merrill, I worked at home. I had so many characters, and they were saying, "How come he's only doing 5 feet a week?" I did these, had these huge scenes with masses of characters in them, and so.
Somebody point out the pencil mileage that you were doing?
No, the suits didn't understand that. Even Tisa David, the head animator. We got to get rid of this man. He doesn't do enough footage. And they said the same thing with Emery Hawkins, who had the greedy pit with this. The whole scene was moving all the time. And so, I had to explain to them. And of course, Richard Williams knew. And he was kind of fending them off so that, I could finish all this. Well, when they handed me out the work to do all of this, I was working on a 7-Up commercial, another one. And
so you're overlapping projects.
Yeah, I'm overlapping projects. So I'm working in my hotel on this commercial, and at the same time picking up, they were showing us what the Leica reel on
the next one.
Yeah, and with Corny's beautiful drawings and everything in there. So I had it almost finished, but I still had work to do on it. And I had to have it shot the next day. Well, they lost my luggage. And so I finally got it at 2 o'clock.
Were you back east shooting all this?
I was working on it back east, but it had to be shot out here. It was for Chicago, but it was being done here in L.A. So I had to get my luggage, and it was lost. Well, they brought it in at 12 o'clock at night. I finished the commercial at 2 o'clock in the morning. The next day, a guy flew out from Chicago, and I had to daylight the print, the pencil test, and get it into editing, and I had to sync it up with the sound. They had no idea what they were going to use for the background, and I took another 7-Up commercial and just took the not the voice track, just the music track, and then Paul Frees was doing the voice of the character, and put that on it, and then put it with the pencil test. I put it with the pencil test, and the guy was supposed to show up at 10 o'clock that day, and we barely got it done in time, and he didn't show up until 12:30. And he shows up, and he's drunk, and he doesn't like anything that I've done on the commercial. So I just blew up, and I said, "You don't realize what I had to do to get this commercial done." And I grabbed him by the tie, and then I realized what I'm doing. And I let go of it and shook him like this, and he looked startled.
But he's drunk. He won't remember any of this.
And he says, well, he's slurring his words, and, he's not drunk enough to, and he says, well, are you going to do it? And I said, yes! So that night, I worked all night long, did all the changes and everything, got him in. Next day it came in, and he loved everything, and we finished the commercial,
And the shoulder shaking had been forgotten.
yeah, right. So those are some of the interesting things. But commercials were very interesting. Each commercial, they loved you. They wanted to know what you were doing and everything. As soon as you finish the commercial,
They don't care.
they don't care, they're off. And while at the time that you got a producer and art director understanding the process and how you worked, they would disappear, and
Yeah.
a new one would come in.
Yeah.
And you'd have to tell them all over again. And I learned a lot of things about how to deal with people. If somebody suggested something that just wasn't going to work, I found out, don't try to be nice to them. Don't say, oh, okay, well, we'll see what, I'll try to do that.
Yeah.
You have to say, that's a crappy idea. That won't work at all, and this is why. You have to be very forceful
With a client.
with the client. And after a while, he says, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. And
They
you-
wanted somebody who was
who is going to be
strong in his views.
strong in his views. Well, one time I had this one commercial, I think I told you about this earlier, they forgot about it. And they had 1 month to do it. They had no designs, they had a rough storyboard. So I had to figure out a schedule and
This
how
is a
much it would
7-Up
cost.
free thing, right? Was that-
No, this was Wholesome Bread.
Oh, that's right. Wholesome bread. You
This
were
was
telling
all
me
for
about that.
Chicago. And so I had to design the characters, do the layouts, do the backgrounds, do the color and everything, and get it all okayed and shot and in the can through first trial, in 1 month. So I had to work, a lot. And what surprised me, I designed the characters, and they said, the guy came in and he says, make them more cartoony. Exaggerate them more. Which surprised me because usually they wanted me to go the other way.
Tone it down.
Yeah. So I went ahead and did that. And he says, yeah, that's great. That's exactly what we want. Well, I designed these machines. I changed the board, made it more interesting. They were all kind of mechanical, cartoony, Rube Goldberg ideas for how to make bread. And they loved it all. They bought the commercial and everything. Then I found out later, I just got 1 month of salary, which was below, it was like, maybe a little over $500 a week. And then
$2,000.
yeah. And what they did was they did billboards and they did ads for newspapers.
So you had print ads and billboards all with your creative work in it, right?
Yeah, with all the stuff that I designed for them. And they trademark all of the machines that I had made in the commercial. And of course, it was a big success. But even so, I kind of liked the challenge, and it gave me more confidence. And at the end of that period, I knew exactly how much everything cost, how long it would take. If I looked at a commercial and understood what they wanted, I could budget it right.
So you were your own production manager, you were the animator, the designer, the background painter,
Mm-hmm.
the only thing you didn't do is go and shoot shoot the thing onto film, right?
Right.
Handed it off.
And I ended up working with Bob again at UE Screen Gems, but I figured out a budget for something, and they would Eureka vacuum cleaner, and give them a 35% markup, and then they would add another 50% and not tell me, you know. And then because they were paying me $250 not to work for anybody else, when they got a commercial, they would deduct that money from.
That was, you were on hold in the weeks that you were off?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And when I realized they were getting me to do all this work for $250 a week, because by the time they had subtracted, I said,
This is stupid.
this is stupid. And Bob had given me, they were going to do a religious show for Israel. And he tore the script in half and gave me, he says, you board the second half and I'll board the first half. And I said, no. I said, I'm leaving. He didn't even know what was going on. And it turned out the guy that was ahead of him was, doing
Penny
some,
pinching.
and not only that, but doing some very illegal stuff, which I never understood. And I didn't work for him anymore. And then I started working for small, picking up jobs here and there. And
Now, what time frame are we talking about? We're talking about the late 70s?
yeah, and SAG struck the industry because the industry wanted actors for live action commercials to stand or act before a television camera, and so that they could pick out the one they liked the best, and they wanted them to do it for free. And SAG said, no way, because they would only pay the person that they picked.
Right. And everybody else had to come in and be on camera for nothing.
Right. And so suddenly no money was coming in, no commercials were being done at all.
Yeah.
And I wasn't making any money. I couldn't collect any unemployment insurance or any of that. And I had no medical benefits. And
Sounds like a dream job to me.
yeah, and then I added up what I was making at the end of the year doing all of this, and I found out I was making less than a journeyman animator at Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
So Virginia said, look at John, we only have 2 more weeks of money left, and then we don't have any.
Yeah.
And my parents, they wanted us to be on our own.
Well, your dad had left Disney by this time, right? So
I think he'd left, but he'd come back to work on the Mouse Factory and stuff later.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I crawled on my hands and knees to Ruby Spears and started off as a journeyman animator. And, I learned what it was like to work, in a regular,
Back in a regular union studio,
Yeah.
which you hadn't done for a while, being in the commercial business.
Right, and also working on a specific way, a specific style, the mouth chart system, which I never really used directly. I would make up my own animation system. So I remembered it from DePatie Freeling. And so I worked on that. And eventually they looked at the animation at the end of the year and they liked my animation. I was working on things like Fang Face and, I can't remember some of the other shows that we were doing. Oh, Plastic Man. I love Plastic Man.
Yeah.
We did a lot of funny gags, but, with Plastic Man that we'd hang in our rooms, but nobody else saw them, luckily. And so we did Plastic Man, and we did a whole bunch of other things. They liked my animation, so they made me a director. And I was a director in training under Nick Nichols. And
Another old Disney hand.
yeah, and he was a big director at Hanna-Barbera before he came to Ruby Spears, and I worked there for a while, learning direction. And here again, it took me a lot longer to direct a show than they would take, just because I had to write all the instructions for the animator and everything down.
Sure.
And knowing how to do it in a way of which any animator who worked in the business could pick it up and do it. And so I had a lot to learn there. Well, then the head of animation was under so much pressure, and somebody said he was drinking too much, but he was letting a lot of stuff go through. The checkers were complaining about it. Ink and Paint was complaining about it, and so he ended up retiring, and they needed somebody to run their animation department. So they put me in charge of that for a while. And that's where I learned how I had 22 animators that was supposedly underneath me. And most of the in-house guys did fine, but we always needed one other person.
Sure.
And so I'd say, well, I'd get a list, and I'd say, well, who should I hire? And I asked the different animators. They'd say, oh, hire this guy. He's fantastic. So I'd hire him, and he'd be nothing but trouble, complaining about this and about that, and just be a big headache. And then there would be another person, they'd say, oh, don't hire him. So on and so forth.
So you learned to hire the ones they didn't want you to hire.
Yeah, and then once I'd hire that person, and they would be great. I couldn't trust what anybody said. And
Had to find out for yourself.
you had to find out for yourself. And so we had some really weird guys working for us. We had one guy that looked like he worked out in a gym. And he came in and he showed some examples of his animation, and I flipped it, and it really moved well and everything. So I hired him, and he brought the animation back when he was supposed to.
But he never worked in-house.
He never worked in-house. We had a lot of freelancers. And I flipped it, and it looked fine. And then it goes to checking, and I get this phone call from checking. Kimball, come on down here. And I see 3 checkers with their hands on their hips, with the animation laid out over the table. And they said, who did this shit?
What was wrong with it?
Well, it worked movement-wise, but it didn't work for ink and paint at all. If you put all the levels down, you could shoot a pencil test, but you couldn't paint it. And there was no way of putting it together. So I literally had to redo the whole thing. So that's what I ended up doing. If anything was wrong.
You were the guy that fixed it.
Yeah, right, because all the other animators were busy. So and that's what was running an animation department was like for me. And I worked real well with the guys in-house, and I had to make sure that the layouts hooked up and all of that. And we had problems. This is where I learned how important it is to get everything done at the right time.
Sure.
We had a genie picture, and everybody in layout drew a different bottle because the prop hadn't been designed. Well, it went into animation, and the other animation head, who they let go, hadn't done anything about it. So I got all this animation back with this bottle, and each scene, each section, the bottle was drawn differently. So I had to.
So you have to put it on one bottle.
Yeah, one bottle on model, and I had to.
You're a poet.
Right, and I have to try to find another animator in house who was busy anyway up to here to help put it on model. And so I learned a lot about the communication between each department.
And clarity and all
And
that.
clarity. One of the things that Ruby Spears did in the beginning was they would have a meeting with the heads of the department at first at the beginning of every week. So you'd hear the problems the writers had with the networks
Right.
and their deadlines.
Right.
And then you could hear from there the problems of the storyboard people and what they had to deal with taking what the budget and what the writers have written, like a storm sequence. Well, that's going to cost a lot more money.
So how do we cut around it?
How do we work with that? And all the way down the line. And so that was another good learning experience because you could see what the different problems for each department, all the way to camera and into post. So each person would give a report. And once everybody began to see how the whole studio communicated, then gradually it was every 2 weeks, and then once a month, and then once every 3 months. And actually, I didn't really go that long because Filmways, who owned the company, was having financial problems, mainly from their publishing end. Actually, the animation was making a lot of money for them. but they ended up having to sell it to Taft in order.
Didn't they all, Hanna-Barbera also was sold to Taft? Hanna-Barbera and Ruby Spears?
Yeah. So we merged together with Hanna-Barbera. They kept our studios separate. And I didn't work for about 9 months at that point.
What year was that? Do you remember?
Gosh, I don't remember.
83? It was in the 80s?
Yeah, it was in the 80s. And then I came back to work as a director, working on all the shows. I can't remember them all. They're all listed here. There's hundreds.
We'll put them up. We'll link to them.
Yeah, because there's just so many shows. And then after I got through, I worked with Nick and Rudy LaRiva.
Yeah,
And if I ever had any problems, I could always ask them, what should I do about this or what should I do about that? And they were very good at that. And so we worked in a building that leaked. I remember sitting here directing, and writing up exposure sheets, and I would have buckets all over the place.
Water on your sheets?
Well, we had to make sure we didn't, and that was the hard part. So there was some funny, interesting things. But we had a lot of very, very creative people. We all knew we were working on television crap, some of the cheapest television crap you can imagine.
Yeah.
Yet there were some fantastically good artists that really weren't used up to their potential.
Yeah.
And we had Jack Kirby working there, doing presentation stuff. And he used to come into my office, and I always had a whole bunch of cookies. I would buy cookies, and anybody who wanted a cookie could come in and get, and I would change the varieties around. So they'd come in and get a cookie, and Jack would, Kirby would come in, he'd tell me all of his war experience during World War II, which were kind of interesting. And they all, John Dorman, crazy John Dorman, he was as crazy then as he was later. And but
Did he have a drinking problem in those days, or was
no, but he did really good boards. I mean, he really had it down. And he was in charge of the department, but he was crazy in the way he talked to people, and yet he somehow or other got these board people together and got things. I had to do a lot of changing of boards because he didn't have time to change them. They had supposedly had 12 weeks to do a board for a show, but in sometimes it was only 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And it would be garbage, and I would have to try and make it work. And by this time, they were starting to send, and they did send everything overseas.
So there's no in-house animation anymore.
No. And I found out, one of the top-of-the-line animators, as good as any Disney animator in Korea, some of them did work for Japanese features, they were making top dollar a little over $500 a week.
And this was in Korea.
This was in Korea, and here a journeyman animator was making $668 a week or something like that.
So he's making 4 or 5 times as much over here.
And yet
$500 a month versus $600 or $700 a
right.
week.
Exactly, but because of the cost of living there, they were living comfortably. I mean, the top of the line animator had a nice house. I even had a driver to. Especially over there, you don't want to drive your own car.
Yeah.
They were crazy the way they drove over there. And they were all really hardworking, good people. I mean, I went over there to help, not as an overseas supervisor, but to relieve the pressure off of some of these overseas supervisors, some of them Canadians or Americans, and they would be over there from, let's say, May clear through to November, working on our shows. And once that show gets over there, they're responsible for getting it done and getting it done right.
Right.
And there was a tremendous amount of pressure on them. So by the end of the year, they would be totally burned out and irritable, in some cases even
So
yelling.
they'd be 6 months there and then 6 months back here. That was pretty much the way it worked. Right?
And then I would go over there and help them, go through the animation and help them with any problems so that they could catch up. I went over there one time, and this one animation director, he had stacks of animation on his desk that he hadn't gone through. And he kind of like he smelled like he hadn't taken a bath for several weeks, and he had a growth of stubble on his face, and he looks emaciated. And when I walked into his office, he said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, they just sent me over here to help you because, they understood that you needed some help." He says, "They're trying to go around me. They're trying to pass the work by me, without me seeing it, And I realized, he was a little bit out into Never Never Land. I said, "Relax." I said, "I'm here. I can help you, and I'll help you get through it all." And so we would go, he would be meticulously, half asleep because at first he would work there 5 days a week and then 6 days a week. And then he'd get there at 7 o'clock in the morning and leave at 11 o'clock at night.
Burnout.
And working 7 days a week. And, he would just be totally a basket case. And so, he would be half asleep and he just couldn't get through the animation as fast as he needed to. Well, what I would do is, because I was fresh and alert, this animation scene's okay, this one's off model, I just want to do one quick drawing over it with a note saying put on model, and
Whip through it.
whip through it. And then this one has a lot of problems, I'd set that aside. So I go through a bunch of animation and then work on those more ones that had either difficult
Sure.
mechanics. And,
Why not?
yeah, and in 2 weeks, the animation was off the desk. And he thanked me. He said, "Boy, I'm so glad you came here." He
So
says,
his attitude changed from paranoia to
to a nice guy, yeah.
why not?
And so, but I also learned the problems of having to deal with people who don't speak your language, who have a different way of looking at things, and also of respecting these people. I mean, one thing I learned is a lot of times they have to work on schlock stuff, but that doesn't mean they aren't capable of doing really good stuff.
Right.
If communicated right. Communication to me is the key, and also setting up production right. One of the things I learned that production costs go up exponentially. If you solve your problems in the script form, and you solve your story problems, then when you go to storyboard, it's not as much of a problem. If there are problems by the time it gets to storyboard, then that becomes...
Then you get real problems.
Yeah. Then from storyboard, once you go into layout and animation, exponentially the costs go way up. And there were times on some projects where a lot of money was spent needlessly because they changed stuff, not necessarily in cheap animation with television studios, but in Disney when they did their projects, sometimes they would change after it had been animated, and have to change whole
Oh,
sequences.
yeah, I remember going to the studio and seeing that, having the studio
Right.
overseas redo it.
And Walt was very good at limiting that. I remember there was only one time that I saw him change a sequence, and it really wasn't that much. And he apologized for it. He said, "I've been spending too much time at the park, and I apologize."
Right. Oh, that back when your dad was.
Yeah. But they really worked hard at solving the problems at the storyboard level and making sure that even before then, that the overall story in script form was working.
Sure.
And a lot of times later on, because they were doing so much, when I went back to doing, I should back up a little bit. I've been working for Ruby Spears.
Right, and then you go back to Disney, right?
Right. I went back to Disney because we were doing Alvin and the Chipmunks, the TV show. They finally did a feature on their own. So they tried to pull all of their stuff up. They forgot about the contract they had with Filmways and Ruby Spears, saying that they contracted out to do the television shows
Yeah.
to Ruby Spears.
Yeah.
And so there was a big legal battle. So everybody was just sitting. We were just sitting there. And I was getting bored. So I found out Disney...
How many years have you been at Ruby Spears by that point? About 4? 3? 4?
Well, I don't know. I have to look at the dates, but it was a long time.
Because Disney TVA didn't really get going until 85, 86, and I think you got there in 87.
87, right.
So you were on the front end, but you certainly weren't there
at the beginning.
at the very beginning of Gummy Bears and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I remember seeing DuckTales. I'm thinking, wow, these guys really have a lot more money. Well, we were getting like a minimum of $75,000 per episode for half hour.
Disney was higher.
Yeah, they were getting over 100,000 at that time.
Yeah.
And they had a 12-week turnaround time for storyboard. They had a 26-week turnaround time.
For the whole show.
No, for the storyboards.
Oh, really?
And whereas Ruby Spears had only 12 weeks at the most. And so that meant that they could do a better show. And also they had TMS, and they were doing fuller animation, in some cases full animation, because they wanted their shows to be able to show worldwide and get worldwide interest. They wanted to be able to dub them, because this was all they learned from looking at the Smurfs, because the Smurfs, the first year they came out, made 600 million per year. And so they realized that if you make a high quality product and it becomes popular, people will buy the merchandise. And they realized how much more they could make worldwide, and so it was a huge amount. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but when I was working on Darkwing Duck, I knew about this, how much it cost to make they made off of merchandising on Smurfs the first year. And so I asked Gary Kreisel, I said, how much money does Disney make worldwide on this?
On this one show?
No, for Disney TV, for the merchandising for it, worldwide, because it was syndicated even in the Soviet Union at that time, and dubbed into all these different languages. And he said $1.5 billion.
Yeah.
And, so...
They make huge amounts of money from merchandise,
Right, exactly.
even to this very day.
Yeah, right. Well, anyway, to get back to my own experience, I worked there, and they were giving us 5-year contracts with automatic raises.
This is when you switched over to Disney.
Yeah.
How did you make the jump from Ruby Spears, where you were sort of getting bored because there wasn't work coming through? What prompted you to jump to Disney, or did they call you and say, we want you to come over?
I called them and found out that they were hiring. They'd like to talk to me. And Alan Zasloff, by that time, had taken over. Somebody else was in charge ahead of that. I can't remember his name, but
Michael, somebody at
no,
Disney.
Michael Webster was still there, and he kind of had worked in animation, so he kind of understood, and he was able, with Tom Ruzicka, to keep the suits away from us. I found out when they first started the Disney stuff, Michael Eisner and Katzenberg were worried. They said they didn't know whether they should be getting involved with television at all.
Right.
And they were worried that it wasn't going to work. And everybody was holding their breath until finally, when the ratings came in and they started making money off of it, then they jumped into it.
Oh, yeah.
And- And so I came there kind of when they were waiting, or just starting to realize how valuable it was. And I worked with, through Alan Zasloff, I got the job. So I had to go to Ken Spears, who we had a good relationship. And I said, I got this job at Disney, they'd like me to come over there. And there's nothing going on here. What do you think? And he said, well, look, we don't even know when this is going to be resolved. We aren't having anything coming in. He says, if I were you, I'd go to Disney.
So when the head guy tells you to go to Disney, I guess you take that as an okay, right?
Right. And so that was working out okay. But then the employee relations says, wait a minute. If these guys are directors, why are they in the Screen Cartoonists Union? They should be out of the union. If they're going to have,
Because you're supervisory.
yeah, if we're going to be supervisory, and we're going to have them, we want to also have them have the ability to hire and fire people. They can't belong to the union.
And this was probably in your first year over there?
Yeah.
87, 88?
Uh-huh. And so they were saying that we had to get out of the union. And I said, well, why? I mean, in every other studio, directors are in the Screen Cartoonists as animators.
Yeah.
It was a kind of a way of continuing on with their union benefits. And they said, well, the feature directors don't belong to the union, and they get their coverage through us, and we want them to have the same, the television people, the directors have the same position, and so you have to be non-union. And I said, well, what difference does that make? And their argument was that I guess it was because we would have better benefits belonging to the union than Disney could provide their directors, that they could sue, and so we had to go before the NLRB, and we told the NLRB,
The labor board, why you should stay in a unit.
yeah, and why, and so Disney backed off. Actually, I had a meeting with all the directors, because I was already by this time vested in the union, and I said, look, I'm vested in the union. I can go off and do aluminum siding, and I still get my full benefits. I said, but you guys, a lot of you guys are just, you got a long way to go.
Right.
And who knows what's going to happen in the future? How long is Disney going to be hiring you? Sure,
Right.
you have contracts now, but in the future, if you go to a different studio,
You want to be able to take your benefits
you
with
want
you.
to be able to take your benefits with you. And so,
Now, I have a question for you. Since you bring up the union, you became active in the union and were vice president.
right.
And were out there with your band during the strikes in
Yes.
79 and 82.
Right. Let me tell you about that. When we were still members of Filmways, we started sending work over as well as Hanna-Barbera. And the union said, wait a minute, we're losing. No way could we compete with, in those days, it was Japan and Korea.
Paying a fraction of what they were
Yeah.
paying over here.
And they were just starting to go into China, which was even cheaper. And so we tried to work out an agreement with them, and they wouldn't do it. So the next time the contract came up, we struck the production companies. Ken Spears called me into his office. At that time, I was directing, or actually, I think.
Were you a union officer at that time too?
Yes, I was vice president of the union at that time, and maybe I was still animating. It's kind of hard to remember exactly when the strike was. But Ken,
79, and then there was
he
another
says,
one in
"Look at-"
82.
Right. He says, I know you're vice president of the union. He said, I was in the editors union, when we struck. I understand where you're coming from. He said, you have to do what you got to do. He says, but I got to do what I got to do. So I just want no hard feelings. Whatever you do, I understand. And I just want to let you know that I have to do also what I have to do, and I know that you're not going to like some of the things that I do. And don't take it personally. That's what
It's business.
Yes, it's business. Right. And I said, okay, I understand that. And so when we went out on strike, we had this kind of understanding, kind of an agreement. And I remember, I can't remember who the business agent, I guess it was
Lou Abbott.
Lou
Then
Abbott.
it was Lou Abbott. No,
The first one was
or 82 it was Bud. And
Bud
it was
Hester.
No, it was Bud for this first one too,
Right.
because he had just become a business agent
Right.
when the first strike hit in 79.
right. And Mo Golub was, I think, the president. He was the business agent. And so they told us, get out. Well, I was picket organizer. And so I had all these artists that,
Drawing picket signs.
yeah. And also on the picket line, I was supposed to maintain and make sure that they all were there. And I remember one time Ken Spears came out. The temperature was over 100 in Sun Valley, where the studio was at that time. We were right at the end of the runway of Burbank Airport. And
Oh,
you'd
yeah.
be working and everything would roar and we were wondering if a plane was going to crash on the roof or not some of the times. They were so low. But anyway, we were all out there. It was over 100 degrees. I remember looking at Gordon Kent, and he's looking at me. How long is this going to last? So Ken Spears comes out, and he says, the strike is over. Everybody get back into work. they ruled that the strike's illegal. They're already starting back to work at some other studio.
Was it true?
No. And I said, wait a minute. People started to put down their signs. I said, nobody leaves here. Nobody stops striking until we hear from our business agent. And Kid looks at me and smiles and snaps his finger like, well, that didn't work, and turned around and walked back in. And it turned out we had people that were picking up work anyway from New York, and they were secretly in the middle of the night picking up work and having it done in New York.
The old strikebreaker scab thing. What did your father have any observations during this time when you were the picket captain?
Well, when I would go in and talk to him about all the problems, and I always had problems, he said, boy, I'm sure glad I'm not in the business anymore. That's all he would say.
Oh, that's encouraging.
You know, and so finally the strike was over, and everybody on the board was saying, we won, we got this, and they're going to have to hire so many percentage of
The 79 strike, yeah, they did.
Yeah, and I said, wait a minute. I said, I don't believe it, as all they have to do is go out of business and change the name of the studio and reopen as a non-union studio and send all the work overseas. Oh, no, we have a promise. They're not going to do that,
Yeah, the promise.
Yeah. And so I said, well, there's loopholes in this contract. I don't think it's going to work. But everybody was, positive. So I said, okay.
Well, it worked for 3 years.
It worked for 3 years, and then when the next negotiations came up, they sent it all overseas, and that was the end of the ink and paint department, and eventually at Hanna-Barbera.
That was a long strike too. I was in on that one.
Yeah, and I heard, I talked to Mo a little bit about it. He was really down afterwards. But Bill, I heard, I don't know how true this rumor is, that Bill Hanna told Mo Gallup, look, he called him in and talked to him. He said, look, if you go on another strike, we're ready for you. And we're going to just send everything over, and do storyboards. That's it. There won't be anybody working here if you don't make sure that this doesn't work. Well, we didn't have a strike fund. We could not last at all. And
I remember.
There was speculation that they called the strike because I remember going to a meeting and they said, we're not going to strike, but we want to have strike authorization. And someone said, you mean to tell me if you are going to strike, you'll have another meeting and we can discuss it, just decide whether we're going to go on strike? And they said, yeah.
Right. Mo said, I was there when Mo said that. And
Yeah.
that was not true.
That was not true. The next time they had a meeting, they said, we're going on strike. And they were already calling people out. So,
yeah, I remember.
So the speculation was that this was a plan to get the union members to cave in on having a certain percentage of work done here before it goes overseas. And the only way that could be done and spare the jobs they felt that could stay here was to do it this way. And the first people to cave in was the ink and paint people
Oh,
at
yeah.
Barbera. And that
Oh,
was
yeah.
the end of it. And the rest is history. And because they were very good at working hard and learning our systems, learning how to animate the way the television studios wanted, and it was very limited, really. It was all a formula. Anybody who could draw and could do in-betweens and a certain amount, a limited amount of knowledge, could figure out how to do it. And they're very hardworking. Most of them very nice people. I look at artists and animators and cartoonists from around the world, and we all kind of have the same kind of camaraderie and way of thinking and
Sure.
respect.
Artists are artists.
Right. And even over here, I remember my last job, I worked at Nickelodeon working on Chalk Zone. there were people from China, there were people from all over the world working there, and we had every kind of race possible, every kind of person that you work with. And working overseas, like Japan, they work differently than they do in Korea, and I learned how they work in Japan and why they work that way, and why but it's different than the way we work,
But there's a lot of similarities too.
There's a lot of similarities, but I found out that the key animators did their own layouts, which
That's different.
that's different. And today with CGI and computerization of animation, it's done totally different now, and it's constantly changing. And I just think that if somebody finds a better way to do it, and if it works and it's cheaper, and yet the results sometimes are better, that's the way it's going to go. And also, the way people watch programming, things are changing so rapidly, so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I'm just amazed at what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing what can be done in CGI today that would have been impossible to do for television
Sure.
just a decade ago.
The technology keeps getting more and more powerful and more sophisticated.
Exactly.
And all that. Let's move back to, you went back to Disney in '87 and you stayed there for pretty much the whole rest of your career.
Right.
You were there from '87, and when did you say, okay, I've had enough?
It was
I'm retired"?
2003, something like that. What happened was, at first, we had our own offices, we were treated as regular directors. Well, as soon as we ruled that we're going to stay with the union, they started taking power away from us as directors.
Yeah.
And at first it was not looking at color and backgrounds and stuff like that, and design problems.
Yeah.
Then it was not correcting storyboards.
Yeah.
Because what we would do as directors, if the continuity wasn't working and the shots were not working, we could rough out changes and go over that with the storyboard supervisor and or producer, to make sure that it was okay that we were doing this, and we had a lot of freedom to do that.
Right.
And then they took that away from us. And then as animatics started coming in, they started pulling everything out. And so they ended up that a storyboard supervisor actually became a director. And we became people who just time.
Timing directors.
Yeah, they called us, timing directors. And all the other studios, if they won an award, usually the timing director got an award. But at Disney, they no longer gave an award to the timing director. And also because the animatics, we'd get a printout of how long each scene had to be.
Right.
And if we wanted to change it, because I always approached a scene with what is the pacing of the show at this point, how fast should the animation be, that was part of timing. Well, sometimes that wouldn't fit into the length of the animatic, so you'd have to go to this person and convince them and tell them why you needed more time or less time. And usually I tried tricks so I wouldn't have to do that to try and make the scene work. But I began to realize we've lost a lot of what we do, and no longer are we timing really shows. We're timing the inside of each scene,
Right.
in relationship to the animatic.
Right.
And it to me was, I finally told the directors, I said, a secretary could do this, but because it was steady work, I mean, other people are getting laid off and rehired, but we were still getting steady work. But each time production, they'd say, we don't have as much money on this next budget, so they would pay us less. And I actually, when I left, I think I was making less than when I started to work.
And how
at
many
Disney.
years later? That's like 17 years later?
15.
15 years later?
15 and a half years later. And So I left. I got laid off is what happened. And I went home, and I was starting to work. I wanted to do my own stuff anyway. And I wanted to do more than just time shows. Because, in the past I had done a lot more than that. So I got a job with Larry Huber working on Chalk Zone. And suddenly I had to do real direction again.
Which must have been really nice.
Yeah, and I said to myself, my God, I died at Disney, But I stayed there because it was steady work.
Sure. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I get that from animation artists all over town. I'm lucky I have a job. I'm glad I have a job,
And-
even if it's oppressive.
Right. But I noticed that really in big studios, a lot of things happen that creative people are let go by the wayside. A lot of misunderstanding, miscommunication. When you work in a big studio, you end up doing a specific task.
Right.
And that's what you end up known for. Actually, what I was known for most was my cappuccino at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I remember.
That's what I did. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when everybody started getting burned out, I would
Give
make
them a jolt.
I would make cappuccino, and people could sit down and talk about anything they wanted to. I found out about all the gossip that was going on. But there was, people who were wonderful designers that were doing, were acting as revisionists because that was the job available.
Right.
And so I realized that a lot of talent, a lot of creative talent wasn't being used. And one time when I was on the portfolio review committee at Disney, I noticed there was only like 3 or 4 styles that I was seeing, really well executed. I mean, gosh, seeing these portfolios, I realized the world is just full of great artists. And I said to myself, how come I'm only seeing 3 or 4 styles? We used to see in the early days, we used to see all different kinds of styles.
Sure.
And they said, well, we only allow production artwork in the portfolio. And I said, well, how are you going to get another Corny Cole or somebody who's
Sure.
creative?
Who can push the style in a different direction.
Yeah, and do something different. I mean, that's what you want. You want to have people who are doing styles to come up with, who can do different styles of drawing and come up with new way of looking at a show. Because what's happening is we've only got 5 basic styles.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, we can't have original artwork. This comes from legal. Because if we have original artwork...
Well, and then if they steal it, there's a problem.
That's right, we get sued. And so all original artwork in portfolios, we have the legal department take it out, so that we only see production artwork. And I said, well,
Get people to sign a release.
yeah, they didn't do that.
No,
They didn't want to even take the time
you don't
to
want
do
to
it.
bother.
Yeah. So then also I found out when you send something overseas and you have a whole totally different style, that means they have to deal with it overseas and train their people on how to draw that way or to make it look that way. And that takes time and it costs more money. And even today in computers, when you're dealing with new textures that you want the computers to use, that means they have to be programmed into the computer, and that's costly. So basically, it got to the point where, in order, the business end of it was sort of dictating what the styles are going to be. And even so, this year I saw, for instance, the reels that were submitted. They were streamed online because I belong to the Television Academy, and I was on the board of the Television Academy.
Right.
And so all the submissions for animation were streamed through, I could look at them on my computer. Well, I found out by spending a little money, I could project them onto my television and get really good high quality, and some of the submissions were sent with very high resolution pixel. Some of them weren't.
Yeah.
And if everybody's looking and judging films by a little screen, that's not the way to look at it, because people have televisions that are much bigger than that.
Sure. Oh, yeah, big screen TVs.
Right. But even so, I noticed there was some really imaginative designs, very good stories. The quality of the programming I was amazed at how good it was.
Yeah.
And not necessarily what we finally end up with, what's finally nominated, but what is being submitted for nomination. There was a lot of creative ingenuity in there, which tells me the animation industry is good and alive. I mean, I saw some Star Wars things that had some computer color that was just in art direction. That was
Unbelievable.
fantastic. And even the Disney shows had story based on action rather than just dialogue this last year. And
That's a switch. In your heyday, there were mainly,
yeah, I just got so tired of talking heads. One group comes in, another group comes in, yap, 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 and then three people from this and one person from this walk off stage, you know. And
you have to time all that.
yeah, boy, it was real exciting. But they're actually getting some visual story based on action, which is a lot more costly, but a lot more exciting.
Right. So you think the industry is going in new and interesting directions in the last few
Yeah,
years?
I think they have to, because, and I think that television today is actually pushing the limits of the motion picture industry.
Sure.
Because, you know, people are looking at big screens, high resolution, and live
Like a little
action.
theater right there at the house.
Right. Surround sound. You got your makeup artist in live action has to make it look as good as you know, they would for a movie now. It's not like the early Star Treks where they had felt glued on very
And you're looking at a 24, 25-inch screen and
This
it's
black and white.
square.
Yeah,
and it's,
right.
You know, or bad color.
Right.
The RCA color set, the round tube, all that stuff. Yeah, it was a different universe.
a different universe. And you know, for a long time, television people were thought of less than feature people. But you know, when we did Tailspin and all these shows, we were doing 70 half hours. And that was just one show.
Sure.
And at the same time, they were doing one Disney feature.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, and yet at the same time, a lot of the critics were relating what we did for television to feature. And it's a different, I worked on features, and it's a different thing, apples and oranges.
Yeah.
But I think with the experience of working on television and doing so much, you know, and also also working on features, you know, a person who's worked on a lot of television, who's good, can go to do great work on features.
Oh, yeah. And people move back and forth.
Right. But, you know, for a long time at Disney, feature people were always considered better than the television people.
Yeah, there's still a dividing line. There's still this kind of look down their noses. Although there's a lot of people working in television that have worked in features,
Mm-hmm.
you still have a situation where there's a snobbishness. It's
Yeah,
there.
and this is breaking down. I mean, it is in live action for sure, and I think it's going to eventually break down in animation. I really feel that, you know, we always one or two people get the credit, you know, like the 9 Old Men, but got the credit for a lot of stuff but it was the teamwork and the communication between the whole group of people. So much talent, and yet at the same time willing to work together. The chemistry of it has so much to do with it. And also the relationship they have with the person in charge.
Yeah.
The person knowing how to delegate authority and use the best of every person working on that project. You know, and you know, Walt did that a lot. if this person was real good with voluptuous, pretty girls, sexy girls, when they'd have a scene like that, that's the person that he would use for it.
Right.
If this person was real good at cartoon pratfalls or whatever, you know, and he used people to their, you know, to their best ability.
But he knew who those people were.
Right.
Today, nobody knows,
That's right.
especially up on the higher echelon.
That's right.
Well, I think we've basically covered the gamut.
There's
So,
more. I could tell you 1,000 stories individually and things that happened.
is there any you want to leave us with, and then we'll wrap this up?
Well, the only thing I can say is you're only as good as the people you work with. And you're only as good as the budget and the people you work with and the time constraints you have. And it's a group effort. And I know that sometimes, like I was saying earlier, one or two people get all of the accolades and all the awards, etc., for doing it. But if it wasn't for all those other people who are doing their job and doing it well, it would never come together.
Huh. Well, thank you, Mr. Kimball.